Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm showing it's 6:32. Doesn't look like we have a lot of people tonight, only about 14. So that's fine. I wanted to start off tonight, first of all, just telling all of you guys thank you for bearing with me. Within a 2-week period, as some of you may know, I ended up with walking pneumonia, a sinus infection, and a bacterial infection. My 89-year-old father had hip replacement surgery, and then my husband had emergency surgery. So my life just literally fell apart. So thanks for your patience. I have graded everything now as far as the first 4 weeks of the discussion forum, as well as all of the reflective. Somebody's got Christmas music going. And then like I said, I'm kind of just really triaging the work and stuff. So I hope to have pretty much everything that's been posted graded by the end of this week. So just thanks for bearing with me. I think I'm finally caught up. I did want to take just a couple minutes tonight before we kind of get into the meat of what we're talking about to really look at and talk about the individual assignment, which I hope I can find on here. Let's see, where is it? There it is. A lot of people have had questions. Quite honestly, I think it's really pretty self-explanatory if you just use this particular template. So the confusion seems to be, are we creating a unit plan with every single lesson in a unit, or exactly what are we doing? So you're creating a unit plan sort of framework. I wouldn't say maybe it's as detailed as many of you may do or some of your school districts or parishes require. But within this unit, I only really want you to create one lesson plan out of the unit. So if you follow the template and look at the exemplar that I posted, hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory. So let's just kind of walk through this real quick. So let's say my title of my unit is that I'm going to, oh gosh, what would be a unit I might want to teach? I'm going to teach a unit on the Revolutionary War. Okay, so that would be the title of my unit, Revolutionary War from, I don't know, 17, I'm not a history person, so if I'm making like ridiculous mistakes, just tell me, from 1774 to 1776, okay? This is going to be maybe in a 9th grade American history class. So then I'm going to summarize right here in this box what it is that I feel like I need to teach. So it doesn't have to be really verbose, just a little bit. That my goal is to make sure that students understand what events precipitated the war, who were some of the leaders, what were major initiatives or strategies, etc. So just summarize the overall picture of what the unit might be. Of course, my mouse is going to go crazy on me here. Hang on, let me get over here. Okay. So then there's just an extra blank page because hopefully the boxes are all expandable for you. So what are going to be my established goals for this unit? Those are going to actually be your standards. And remember, we've talked a lot about unpacking standards. So, you would type the actual standard here where it says established goals. And then you're going to break it down. It kind of gives you the opportunity to do that through some guiding questions. So what is it that students will be able to independently use their learning to? So for me, maybe it might be that I want them to be able to make connections between the American Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, okay? Understandings, what do I want them to understand, okay? So, this is how they're getting meaning. Then I'm going to develop my essential questions here. What is it that I want them to acquire? So I want them to be able to know, and this may be things like facts, it could be concepts, it could be skills. It really depends on the unit and what the standard is asking you to do. And then it actually does break it down into skills. Okay, so students will be skilled at, and it may be something like problem solving, it may be making interdisciplinary connections, it might be to understand inferences, or to look at cause and effect. It could be any number of things.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. For the established goals, when you're starting to write the standards, do you want us to actually write them out or just put like the standard number? Like if I'm using the ones from Louisiana Believes,
If you can do either. If you just write the number though, let me know your source. So like if you're using Louisiana Believes, just put, from Louisiana Believes,
Okay.
standard 1.2 or whatever. Because we have people from all over the country, so some people may be using their state standards that are not the same as Louisiana.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and guys, if you do have questions, please do jump in and ask me. Where it says evaluative criteria, this is where you're going to look for evidence of student learning. Okay, we're not evaluating the lesson or anything like that at this point. It's really all about the students. So, for example, I may want my students to show 90% mastery of being able to show a cause-effect relationship within, I don't know, pick something, whatever. Curriculum embedded performance assessment. So this might be something like, for example, we'll use this class. What I'm asking you to do is a performance assessment. I'm giving you a scenario or a case study or information, and you have to now perform and show me that you know how to apply the knowledge. Okay? You don't have to.
Dr. Johnson.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. So for this part, for the curriculum embedded performance assessment, would this be where we would say things like the summative assessment, tests that we wrote, projects, things like that?
Yes, absolutely. Now you don't, because guys, these unit plans can get extremely long, and I'm not expecting y'all to give me a dissertation on this stuff. You don't have to put more than 1 or 2 evaluations. I know that great teachers do evaluation every single day, even if it's just in a small formative way or whatever, but give me kind of the big rocks is what we're looking for. So, stage 3, the learning plan, key learning events and instruction. So again, if this is a unit that's going to last 2 weeks, you do not have to give me 10 key learnings. You can just do the big rock sort of thing. So, if the major focus that I'm looking at is maybe cause and effect, problem solving, and being able to make inferences based on the historical context, those would be the 3 key learnings that I want them to do. Then I would just give me a teeny bit of information about how you're going to go about teaching that particular element, okay? And like I said, again, you can always look at the exemplar if you're unsure. Okay, this is where I think the confusion's coming in. You do not, let's say that I'm using those 3 main standards, cause and effect, problem solving, and inferencing based on historical context. I want, pick one and write a lesson, okay? You don't have to do a lesson plan for every single thing. So let's say I decide that I'm going to really want to focus on my lesson about cause and effect. So what were the causes of the Revolutionary War and what was the effect of it historically? So my overview would be just basically what I just said. What do the students need to know? They probably need some understanding of what it means to be a cause, what is a cause and what is an effect, and how are the 2 related. How much time am I going to spend on this? So am I going to spend 3 45-minute periods on it? Am I going to teach it in a 3-hour block? Whatever. What are you going to use as resources? And it can be things as simple as the textbook. You may have the students do an inquiry search using Google, anything like that. Okay? Now, this one, it talks about MA model curriculum lesson plan template. That's just letting you know this is actually from Massachusetts, and this is their template that they use. And again, all you're doing is taking the same lesson that we just did on the previous page, and you're writing it out in more detail. This is sort of, sorry, my computer's been slow here. This page 4 is the big picture, the overview, big rock kind of ideas. This is where you get into more detail. So what is going to be your, even pare it down. Let's say this lesson is going to be taught across 3 days in 45-minute periods. Pick one day and tell me what the name of your lesson is. It's going to be 45 minutes. Specifically, what are you going to get into? Is it the introductory lesson, or is this going to be something where you're really looking more for, like Richard said, they're going to actually be working on a project, or we're doing part of our summative evaluation, etc. Now remember way back on the first couple pages where I had you write out or tell me about on page, what page is that? Sorry, I have to let my computer catch up. Page 3, where I had you write your standards. Well, obviously you're not going to teach every standard every single lesson. So here is where you're going to get even more specific. So what is it that is your standard you're teaching on this day? And it may not even be an entire standard, because remember, when we unpack standards, there can be multiple goals and objectives within a single standard. So you may even break it down here and unpack it and say that you're going to really focus on the causes today of the, the Revolutionary War, as opposed to the whole idea of cause and effect. Develop your essential questions. You guys have been doing great on that on your assignment, so I think we've pretty much mastered that. Then what are your specific objectives for the day? And what I mean by objectives here, it's those statements that, I love it when teachers put it on the board, because I think students need to know what they're supposed to be able to do. So it may be something as simple as students will be able to identify, explain, and apply information from readings to discuss the various causes of the war. Okay? If you have a language objective, I know in a lot of states now, because we have so many second language learners, there is a language objective required. So it may be that you really want to work on oral speaking fluency or something along those lines. What is your targeted academic language? So, a lot of times, and I think I mentioned this in a couple of people's feedback, it's really important, especially like in math and science, but in history too, that we use the appropriate language. So it is actually academic language like they're going to encounter on a standardized test, or in just normal speaking about a particular topic. So in this case, maybe, I really want to make sure my students understand inference, or they understand some of the key vocabulary that may be new to them. So what do you need students to know and be able to do before the lesson? Obviously, if you've never taught cause and effect, that would be something. If they don't have any context or knowledge of the key players, during the Revolution, then those might be the kinds of things, okay? Anticipated student preconceptions or misconceptions. I would really kind of think about this one, because I think a lot of times we don't often figure into our teaching what it is that students may have a misconception or misunderstanding about. And one way I like to do that, just as a teaching tool, is I always have my students do predictions, no matter what content I'm teaching, and it's really and that's kind of what goes here, is what are they predicting or thinking, and sometimes I'm a little bit shocked about their lack of knowledge and understanding about what I think are pretty basic things. Again, materials and resources, pretty self-explanatory. Whoops, sorry, my mouse is kind of going crazy on me, stop that. What are some specific strategies that you might want to use? And then again, here's where we maybe get a little bit more detailed. So for example, let's say that we're going to give a big, huge final exam that includes multiple choice essays and short answers as our summative assessment for this whole unit. Well, remember, this is just a single lesson within that unit. So what assessment am I going to use this day? And maybe this day we're not doing a lot other than building background knowledge and schema. So my assessment might be something as simple as an exit ticket, where students answer a question. Okay, then for those of us that are a little bit older, you may remember Madeline Hunter. This is kind of from her. What are we going to do to open our lesson? What are we doing during the lesson? And then how are we going to close the lesson? So it's just that whole lesson teaching cycle. And again, resources, you don't have to necessarily do it by lesson sequence, not for this particular exercise, but that gives you some ideas. And again, I'm not expecting a comprehensive list, for a 2-week lesson where it's going to be on day 1, I do an exit ticket, on day 2, I do, I give a quiz or whatever. You can just list sort of the big rock things here. But if you're doing something that you think is really unique or different, be sure and put that on here so that we can see that, okay? And as we know, it should include both formative and summative assessment, okay? So that's that assignment, okay? Do y'all have any questions about that?
I have to say that makes it so much more understandable. I am so much more confident in my ability to do this assignment now. Good. Thank you so much for spending time on that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, no matter how hard I try, I just never can seem to get the written instructions that you know, are as comprehensive as just a simple conversation. So glad to do that, Richard. Absolutely. Okay, so let me stop sharing and let me go back. Guys, bear with me a little bit here too. Sorry. I'm going to take you to, I don't think there's anything in week 6 that I needed to go over with you, but let me just look real quickly. You know, week 6 is pretty soft. Let me go ahead and go to the final exam because, you know, probably the good thing is that I have given you a lot of options, and probably the bad thing is that I've given you some options because that can make it a little confusing. Let me see. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Tell me if you can't see it. Okay, so the big thing that I want to remind everybody about the final exam is that normally our lessons end on Sundays. For the final exam, it ends on Saturday. Grades are due from me to the registrar by 10 a.m. on Monday, December the 10th. And I do have to have at least a day to grade, guys. You know, I love y'all, and you know, if you for some weird reason you can't get it in by 11:30, let me know, and I might give you some grace. But because these are pretty comprehensive and lengthy, it's hard for me to do in a day. I'm just going to tell you. All right, so you have some options, okay, in terms of the final exam. So let me, I hate this mouse. It's just not working well. Okay, so you have 2 options for a final exam. Within those 2 options, option number 2, you actually have 3 choices that you want to do. So I guess if you really wanted to look at this mathematically, you have 4 choices total. So the first one is a case study. And yes, I will tell you it is more intense and more time consuming. But I still think it's worthwhile and valuable, even if you don't actually choose that and complete it at your leisure, you know, when you've got, you know, your 2-week break at the holidays or whatever, to pull it off and look at it, because the case study that's in option number 1 for your final exam is very, very similar to what you're going to find on the SLLA as well as other state principal certification tests. You know, because we're, you know, just like we've done with assessment for students, we're doing the same thing for assessment for leaders. You know, at the state and national level, is how it's not just what you know, it's not what you can regurgitate, it's how you can apply what you've learned. So, you know, when our students get to that test, sometimes they're surprised that it's really all application. So, you know, if you want to spend the time on it, I think it's well worth your while. It'll be a great study tool for you when you get ready for the exam. But if you don't, I understand, because it is pretty time intensive. So let's go ahead and look just real quickly. I'm not going to walk you through all of this. You know, I'd be glad to do another Zoom meeting with people who are doing this particular assignment if that becomes something people want. Just let me know. So basically what you're going to do, you're going to look at assessment, you're going to look at classroom observation, you're going to look at a curriculum review. I can't speak all the time, all of a sudden. You're also going to create a curriculum instruction plan, a professional development plan, and then again, kind of goes back to the work of a curriculum review committee, okay? So like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I'm just going to be honest, I'll be surprised if a lot of people choose this, but it can be very helpful to you, okay? So let's go back up here. So within the case study, you're going to watch a video, then you're going to create a timeline. You're going to develop, as I said, a curriculum review committee plan, and I've given you a template for that. You're going to also create major activities, develop your professional development plan, etc. So a lot of people were like, ooh, I don't want to do Algebra 1 or whatever. You know, you will find as you move on into leadership that you're going to be asked to observe a lot of teachers that are outside your content area. You know, I thought the first time I was ever going to, you know, do I remember sitting in a physics class. I hated physics in high school. It was my hardest subject. But you will learn that it's really more about teaching. And yes, content matters, but not as much as just great teaching practices. So here's some videos, and I think we gave you some choices and options to look at. And then again, I think it goes through pretty systemically what it is. So again, happy to open that up and do a Zoom meeting. Just somebody put something in the instructor virtual office if that's something you want me to do. Now let's look at the other option. Okay? And oh, I've got a wrong date in there. I must think it was June or something. I don't know what I was doing on that one. Sorry about that. I'll fix it. Okay. So within the final exam option, you can do either a PowerPoint, a video, or an essay and a paper. And a lot of people have been a little bit confused on the length, and that's my fault because I probably put different things because I change my mind all the time, and I sometimes don't catch all of my edits. So let's say you want to do a PowerPoint presentation. It does need to be at least 20 slides, and that does not include the title slide or the reference slide. And basically, it's just everything you've learned in this course that you think is valuable. Pretty simple. A video, I said 20 minutes, but it's fine if it's between 10 and 15. And then be sure and submit in Moodle your reference page separately. The essay and paper, it is a total of probably 10 pages roughly by the time you do your title page, your abstract, your reference page. But as long as it's at least 5 pages of actual writing, that's fine too. Notice I do say at least 5 sources, and I will go back and fix all this as soon as we're done tonight. So any one of those is fine, and hopefully that pretty much explains it. But like I said, I've really got some wrong dates that I just absolutely missed, so I will fix all that this evening. Okay? All right, so do you guys have any other questions? And while you're thinking, if you have questions, my dog's crying, so let me let her out of the room. Hang on. Come on, Trish. Come on. Go downstairs. Go downstairs with Daddy. Go. Let me see, you can't come in. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so any questions about final exam or any of the assignments or anything at this point? Is everybody feeling okay? Okay, awesome. Well, let's kind of talk about what we were supposed to talk about tonight. Don't do that. Stop that. Again, let me go back to share my computer, share my screen. Come on. There it is. There it is. Okay. So what we're going to be talking about tonight really is delving a little bit more into curriculum, and then we're going to talk specifically about assessment. So I think I've told you guys before, there are certain educational researchers that you really need to know and study because they are considered the foremost experts. Robert Marzano is one of them. Robert Marzano is known mostly for really great teaching practices. So if you've got, for example, a problem with vocabulary in your school, he is the go-to guy in my personal opinion that really can help you. So let's talk about what Marzano and his research laboratory, which by the way, if you go to his website, you can sign up free for most of his resources are free and they're amazing and awesome. So we did include his website here as well. Okay, whoa, stop that. Okay, sorry. Oh my goodness, this stupid mouse not gonna work. Come on. Hang on guys, sorry. Let me try this again. Okay, here we go. Now I think we're okay. Okay, so according to Marzano, a guaranteed and viable curriculum is the most important thing if you really want to raise and impact student achievement. Now, what does he mean by guaranteed? Any ideas, guys?
I mean, if I was to take a stab at it, I would say something along the lines of something that would be available to every student, guaranteed to be exposed to it, no matter what.
Excellent. Yeah, and Richard, you're exactly right. When he talks about a guaranteed curriculum, what he's talking about is the fact that every single student in a particular system is going to get the same level of curriculum, whether they live on the north side of town or the south side of town. It doesn't matter, okay? And that not only are they going to have this guaranteed curriculum, they're going to have the resources and things like that necessary to be successful, okay? So what do we think he's talking about when he says a viable curriculum? Two pieces.
Well, one that's actually attainable and reasonable.
Exactly. You know, I've seen a lot of school districts and parishes and others put out curriculum that, you know, looks good on paper, but it's unrealistic. It's sort of like asking students who are in fourth grade to be doing, you know, complex algebraic, you know, math work. Okay. So this is his actual, I'm not going to read this to you, but this is his actual definition of that. And another key element in his definition is that students must have an equal opportunity to learn. And while that seems like, you're like, oh, of course, that makes sense, I will tell you, that is very, very challenging to make happen in a system. So a lot of you know that, you know, I spent time as an area superintendent in Dallas ISD, and we had at the time around 160 to 165,000 students. So while we had a guaranteed curriculum, we knew what everybody was supposed to be teaching, and we also knew that it was aligned with our standards and our assessment. So it was viable in that regard. That did not, it was the part that we kept seeming to really struggle with and oftentimes not do very well regarding was the opportunity. So what I mean by that is, let's say that we have in a high school, both high schools are on the same bell schedule. So each class is supposed to be 60 minutes. And, you know, let's say we have two different schools with 60-minute periods, and we've got some ninth graders taking Algebra 1. The problem is one teacher over here spends a good 10 to 15 minutes taking roll, talking to the students, collecting homework, doing a lot of administrative tasks. The other teacher in another school across town has a very efficient administrative process, so she spends literally 2 minutes getting students settled, checking roll, collecting homework, doing whatever she needs to do. So just from a sheer time standpoint. So teacher A, teacher number 1, that 60-minute period, because of her loss of time doing administrative tasks, the announcements, whatever else gets in the way, she is now down to 45 minutes. Teacher number 2 over here does that very efficiently, and let's say that she spends grand total, 5 minutes. She has 55 minutes to teach the same content. Does that mean our students have an equal opportunity to learn? No, because while we're delivering the same curriculum, our time elements are different. Also, if you have an effective versus a less effective teacher, the more effective the teacher is, the better opportunity students have to learn. So we talk a lot about curriculum and development and, you know, perfecting it and all of that. But at the end of the day, Marzano says, and he's been backed up by tons and tons and tons of researchers, that every student has to have access to and the ability to work with an effective or highly effective teacher. And that's where we began to run into problems, because we have a spectrum of teachers. Some are highly effective and some of them are certainly less than proficient. So again, we talked about this. I'm not going to spend some time here. But there's some sort of I don't know, principles embedded within his research that talks about that you have to have a sequence of courses and you have to align both horizontally as well as vertically. So what he means by that is let's say that we're talking about horizontal alignment. So for example, same grade, same content, you have to make sure that the curriculum that is being implemented across your system is the same. Horizontal alignment is not as difficult to do as vertical alignment. So what I mean by that is, let's go back to our math analogy. So let's say that you expect all 10th graders to take geometry. And you've done a pretty good job of that horizontal alignment of that geometry curriculum so that everybody's aware of your objectives and what needs to be taught. What you also have to think about is, what are those foundational skills and concepts that students have to know and be able to do before they enter into that geometry? So what does that mean in terms of your ninth graders? Well, what if you have some ninth graders who are in developmental math, some are in algebra, some maybe aren't even taking a math. I don't know what that would happen, but so not everybody's walking in with the same vertical alignment in terms of knowledge and information as you would hope. So that's a piece that may have to be fixed. So when we talk about that guaranteed and viable curriculum, it's not only across grade and content, it is also what are those foundational skills or the things that students should have mastered in the grade before, as well as what do you want them to know to move on to the next grade level after the course, okay? Also, too, he's really big on data-driven assessment. In fact, we have a whole course kind of devoted to that, so you'll certainly learn more. He also talks about power standards and power indicators. And what he means by that is, I'm sure you guys are aware that if you pull up any given state's curriculum, whether it's states that are using Common Core, or like Louisiana Believes, or I'll pick on Texas because, you know, they never do what anybody else does. So Texas has always had their own standards. The curriculum is huge. And Bill Daggett, who's another great researcher and sort of educational guru, has said that if a teacher tried to teach the entire curriculum for any particular grade level or content, they would have to teach 3 solid years with no breaks to be able to really teach to master every single standard. You cannot teach every standard and everything that's in most curricula. It's too much. There's not enough time. And what we end up doing is teaching at a very superficial level as opposed to teaching to true mastery. So what Marzano suggests is figure out what your power standards and your power indicators are so that you can teach the things that are most important. You know, and that's why unpacking those standards matters. That's why bundling like standards together and using integrated curriculum is really helpful and important in making sure that we do this. Okay. We also have to remember too that there has to be some management of a good curriculum. So we have to not only think about how much time do students need to be successful in the curriculum, but also what do our teachers need? You know, we cannot expect teachers to spend every waking moment outside of classroom teaching time working on curriculum. So we have to build in specific time for teachers to plan, to discuss, to dissect, to instruct, to assess, and then to review, revise, and work on these pieces. So, you know, whether it's use of an instructional calendar, that kind of thing. You know, I'm a big proponent of building in professional learning community times during the actual school day, because this work is so important that if we don't build in intentional time for teachers to collaborate and work together, then we're really asking them to do some very unrealistic sort of work. Okay? Yeah, Richard, did you have a question? Okay. Yeah, you're muted, so we can't hear you. Okay.
There we go. I was just saying that at my particular school, each not only grade level, but each subject is so incredibly isolated that I could not tell you the names of anyone in my school who doesn't teach my grade level. And
Yeah.
it is an issue. It is a very big issue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is. It's a huge issue. You know, one time I was a high school principal with almost 3,000 students and over 250 staff members. And that was a huge barrier for us. So, you know, one of the things that we did was we developed a very robust and it was a little bit complex, but once it got rolling, it kind of made sense, I think, to everybody, organizational structure. So, you know, can be a very concrete, sequential kind of person. So it was like the first week of every month, you met with your content area. The second week of the month, you would meet with your grade level. And we had very specific protocols for each one of these. The third week of the month, we would meet in interdisciplinary teams. And we changed that up all the time. And then the last week of the month, we brought everybody back together to do kind of share and debrief what it was that we were doing. And that really helped tremendously. I will tell you, it was a scheduling nightmare. But once we got it rolling, it really, really worked well. And we also, because again, big schools, so it was myself as principal, and I had 6 assistant principals. Yeah, 6. And so we would assign them to the various teams as well, and they provided the support and materials and all those kind of things. So not only did it help the teachers to work together and to plan, but, you know, oftentimes assistant principals, particularly at high schools, they get pigeonholed into, you're the locker guy, you're the textbook person, you know, you're the one that does this. And I really felt strongly that, you know, I'm grooming principals. So they needed to have that very strong instructional base and foundation. And I'm very proud to say every single one of them went on to become, actually all of them ended up being high school principals or assistant superintendents or whatever on down the line. So you have to, it's not a matter of just, we want to do this. You really have to think creatively and plan for it. And, you know, it probably took us a good 3 years to perfect it, because we kept kind of changing things up to figure out what worked well. But it is absolutely essential, you know, because you can't just assume that when you get the 9th grade English teachers together, that's going to really fix the problem. Because I needed those 9th grade English teachers talking to my 8th grade teachers at another school. I needed them talking to my 10th grade teachers, my 11th grade teachers, my 12th grade teachers. And then we even went so far as we had our teachers talking to our elementary teachers as well, so that they could see this sort of big picture progression. So really important. Thank you, Richard, for bringing that up. Okay, let me move right on along here. Okay, so again, I'm not going to go into a lot of this. You guys can certainly read. We also can't forget, as much as, you know, if I could wave Tracy's magic wand and make all the state and standardized testing go away, I would, but unfortunately it's here to stay. So it's also really important that when we think about and talk about curriculum as well as instruction, that we are adhering to and aligning to our state and district standards or the National Common Core, depending on where you are. So also, again, and I cannot overemphasize this. Bill Daggett says that we could throw out 50%, more than half of the standards that we currently have in our curriculum, and we would still have too much to teach. So,
sorry, Ms. Johnson, you broke up on that last part.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bill Daggett says that we could throw out more than 50% of the current standards and teachers would still have too much to teach and not enough time. So the other part of this work that we need to be doing together, and this is where it all comes back to assessment. Before we do any of these cool things where we're unpacking standards and all that, we cannot forget that we have to become experts at understanding assessment. So, like for example, in Texas, they publish 2 to 3 years later, released state standardized tests. And along with that, there's usually what they call a blueprint or a framework or whatever. Louisiana does something similar. So you have to go in and really analyze those tests and look at, pair a question with a standard or standards. You have to break down those questions so you know exactly what it is that students are being asked to know and to do, as well as what connections they need to make to successfully answer the question. Then you also have to look at all of the answer choices, because it's amazing how tricky those can be sometimes. So we always spent time and were as interested in the wrong answers as we were the right answer, because we needed to see what they were putting out there that was going to trick our kids or, you know, trip them up as they were trying to do this test. So that analysis is a huge part of leading this curriculum design. So theoretically, you start with the assessment. And, you know, we've all been talking a lot about Wiggins and Mattei, backwards design. Look at that assessment. Look at those questions. What are the objectives that are being, you know, asked or being questioned, you know, assessed? That's the word I'm looking for. What are those objectives or standards that are being assessed on the test? Break them down, look at right answers, wrong answers, and then look at how your kids did on it. Now, granted, that's historical data, but if you track that historical data for at least 2 years, you're going to see a lot of trends. For example, in my school, my students did great on summarization, but they were doing miserably on vocabulary. We were shocked. Then I started looking at, I'm like, that's a problem. So then we would do our observations and learning walks and whatever we called them at the time. And we started seeing, and we would particularly go in and look at how teachers were teaching vocabulary. And guess what? I figured out real quickly what the problem was. My teachers didn't know how to teach vocabulary effectively. They were doing here's your vocabulary list on Monday. Your homework tonight is to look all the words up and define them in the dictionary. Then Tuesday, use them in a sentence. And then on Friday, we're going to have a quiz. And lo and behold, students were successful. Well, duh, your instruction's not effective. So we did an entire professional development series on how to effectively teach vocabulary. And guess what? Scores went up the next year because we were able to pinpoint the specific problems. So that's why assessments have to be analyzed to make sure that it matches our written curriculum as well as our taught curriculum. The other sort of eye-opening thing that happened for us with our school was we kept having some problems with specific objectives, particularly on our district administered final exams. And for the life of me, no matter what group we worked with, what set of teachers, I couldn't figure it out. So I was meeting with my department chairs, and I'm kind of like, okay, guys, I don't know what else to do. We got to figure something out. My teacher said, leave it to us. And I had a great relationship with my teachers. Thankfully, they were all amazing and awesome, and I trusted them. And they said, we're not going to teach the district's curriculum anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean you're not going to teach the curriculum anymore? They said, because the curriculum is not what is being assessed. Trust us. So they went out and they pulled the good stuff out of the district curriculum. They stole some curriculum, not literally, but kind of did, from other school districts and friends and other places. Then they created a lot. And they completely aligned it to the district assessments. And lo and behold, we went from like a 40% passage rate in 1 year to over a 90% passage rate because the teachers knew what needed to be done. And thankfully, I was just smart enough to get out of their way and give them all the resources and hurrahs I possibly could. So don't assume because your district gives you a written curriculum or your school does that it's a good one. I've seen some great curriculums from districts, but I've seen some dismal ones as well. So sometimes we have to also be very critical consumers of what we're being asked to teach. And don't be afraid to take a risk and fix it if you see there's problems. Okay? Let's see what else I want to go over with you guys. Tracking systems, we've kind of talked about that. A lot of school districts do that for you now as well. Just trying to think how much more we want to get into. Some of this really is stuff we talk about in other classes. I guess the other piece of it too, if we're talking about this whole idea of the triad between alignment of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, you know, the little triad. A lot of students, and if we do a really great job aligning those pieces, we have a great curriculum, we know that it's going to be, that it teaches what's going to be assessed, and then we have strong instruction so that teaching and learning really happens within the classroom. Good first instruction will take care of more than 90% of your students. Okay, so 90% are going to master it. First time around, great teaching, all of that. What about the 10% who doesn't? Well, we all talk about we'll do after school tutoring, we'll do Saturday school, you know, been there, done that, tried all that. The problem that I always found, and maybe it was just a product of where I worked, but I usually had a very high, low socioeconomic percentage of students in my school. So while extended day and programs sound great, my district didn't provide a late bus. Or, you know, those students couldn't stay after school because they had siblings to take care of, or they had to go to a job or whatever. So we built in day, during the day, tutorials, enrichment, and all of that. We didn't rework our schedule, didn't do all that. We did it over lunch. And then, whenever we could, like let's say the students had a PE class or something like that, we would take 10 or 15 minutes out of those particular classes to do some triage. And it was actually taught as part of it. We embedded those strategies into the curriculum with our PE coaches and our teachers, and that really helped tremendously. And as you see, we design a schedule that we can help students while they're still in school, okay? RTI is very, very important, and you guys have heard me preach my sermon already, so I won't repeat it, about don't forget about enrichment. One of the interesting trends, if you look at student achievement data over an extended period of time, so let's say you look at a 5 to 10 year span, and if you are, if a student starts out here, okay, let's say the standard is at this level, whatever that may be, 50%. And you've got a student who's scoring at 90%. And then you've got a percentage of students who are scoring in the 20s and 30s. Historically, over time, assuming that we have the alignment between curriculum, instruction, and assessment, that's all working for us, and we have effective teachers, what happens is the kids who are at average, or 50%, will maintain. The students who are below average will eventually come up to average. But you know what happens to our top scoring kids? If we're not really conscious of tracking their data as well, and we make sure that we're constantly enriching and pushing them, we bring them down to average. So in places where they're really taking on accountability and they're looking at growth models, guess what? That kid who started out in the 99th percentile and over time we've brought him down to the 50th percentile, that can be devastating in a growth model when it comes to accountability. And it's also grossly unfair to the student. So enrichment matters just as much as that remediation. We tend to spend all of our time and energy on remediation. Okay, so these are just some examples. What is the difference between high achievement, high accountability districts and schools? And these are sort of the exemplars. And again, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. But if you have a question, just jump right in, okay? Another powerful piece, and I think I'm going to close on this one tonight. I don't know that many of us, I'll tell you, I did actually implement this, and I was pretty astounded how powerful it was. But how many times do we sit down and say to ourselves, what do students need to know and be able to do in this greater course? So what is it by the end of first grade? What do you want a first grader to know and be able to do? What do you want them to know and be able to do at the end of algebra? In the high school, you can start. What do we want a graduate to know and be able to do? And work backwards from there. When you do this exercise, it really causes teachers to focus on what is most important within the teaching and the curriculum. It is a great communication tool with parents. And we tried to always get our list on one page. We also shared that with our students, and they created their own tracking and monitoring sheets. So that, let's say, for example, if we wanted a first grader to be able to read consonant, vowel, consonant words, and use phonetics to be able to do blends or whatever. You teach the kids those pieces and let them track their progress. And again, it's one more element that ensures that we have that guaranteed curriculum and that it is viable, because we have now shared that with every stakeholder. So there's a different level of accountability than we get from a state level assessment or test. It's really being held accountable to ourselves for what we say is important. Okay, all right. And again, I think this is all pretty self-explanatory. So with that being said, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, so sorry, it's hard when I'm sharing screen. I can't see the chat, so I'm going to see. So Deborah asked, can she, she's already submitted her assignment, can she update? Yes, just email it to me. It's easier than me unlocking, so just email it to me. That's not a problem. Task stream. You do, Dr. Perry and I have been debating about task stream, and this is not official yet, but I think we're going to discontinue using task stream starting in the spring, so you won't have to pay for it anymore. And we're going to go to probably Google Docs. So for task stream right now, I'm going to do a massive dump for you, so you don't actually have to go in and put anything in there. I'll do a mass load. Okay. Yeah, and thanks, Jennifer. Solution tree is awesome. Okay, and if you haven't read what Jim wrote, that's awesome, Jim. Oh, and Megan too. Thank you. That's awesome. Guys doing some cool stuff. Okay. All right. So in our last 8 minutes here, what questions, comments, concerns do you guys have? Just jump on in.
I just want to say thank you again for the explanation. I have been taking notes on exactly what was needed for all of the assignments coming up. Module 5 was confusing. It was at least tossing me for a little bit of a loop. For the final, I was on the misconception that option 2 included a PowerPoint and a video and a paper. So thank you for clarifying that as well.
You're quite welcome. And no, I'm not that sadistic. I would not do that to y'all.
Oh yeah, that's why my eyes kind of went wide when I saw it. I was like,
yeah, when I first taught this course a couple of years ago, I gave everybody the case study, and everybody's like, oh my God, it's too much, it's too much. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you an option. And then I'm like, you know what? I certainly have worked in very diverse environments with lots of diverse learners, and I thought some people, a video is right up their alley. Some people would rather die than do a video. So yeah, it's all about choice. Choose one of, actually it's one of 4 options, really, is the way it works. Okay.
I greatly appreciate the clarification.
No problem. No problem at all.
Ms. Johnson, I had a question about the unit plan or like lesson plan. Could you, I don't know if you're able to pull it, well, I guess you could see it, but on the area that was saying evaluative criteria, next to the embedded assessments, is there anything that needs to go in those boxes, or is that kind of just like a header or like sidebar for the embedded part?
Yeah, it's just a sidebar. It's just the way the template is.
Okay.
Some people choose to write something there, some don't. And guys, keep in mind, whenever I give you a template, I am not looking for a very specific kind of answer. We're dealing with, we're not in a factory producing widgets. We're dealing with humans. And I know what works for me when I'm planning a lesson and I'm going to be delivering something versus what may work for somebody else. So really and truly, the whole premise or idea behind this is I want you to think. I want you to be able to apply what you've learned. I want this to go into long-term memory, so when you do take your certification test, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that, and you breeze on through. But at the end of the day, take these templates and use them, edit them, change them, put 2 or 3 of them together so it makes sense for you. They're really just tools to help us organize and think about teaching in a very systemic way. Back a million years ago when I started, we were given a lesson plan form, and that was all we were given. And nobody told me how to do anything. And, so I'm going through the textbook and the teacher's guide and the curriculum, trying to figure all this out. And, all I knew is I was supposed to have my materials listed, a few instructional activities, and a time frame. We've come a million miles since that. And these are really, like I said, to help you be thoughtful about the way you plan, to make sure that what we're teaching is actually what is going to be tested, because otherwise we're wasting our time as well as our students' time. And then finally, to put it in a format that, effective planning is too much for a single teacher to do. In Tracy's ideal world, all planning would be collaborative, so that you can use something that you could hand off, or you can work together with your teacher next door to create a plan that makes sense. Does that help? Don't overthink this, guys, really. It's not like we're going to be sending a rocket into space and we've got to be absolutely precise, to prevent a catastrophe. This is just figure it out, learn it, feel better about it, understand it. And like I said, too, I may tell you things in this course you disagree with. I think Heidi Hayes Jacobs is the best thing since sliced bread. Some of you are like, I think her ideas are really pretty stupid. They're not actually, that doesn't work. And that's okay. It's all about just looking at different perspectives and finding what's best. I was the principal of 4 different schools, and I was an assistant superintendent in 2 different school districts. And I will tell you, every school I led, we did things differently. You know, we did not replicate. I mean, it's not like I figured it out in my first school and we did the same thing at my second and the same thing at my third. It's not it. You have to know who you're dealing with, your community, and the particular needs. My first school was 1 point away from being closed, literally, for low achievement, and we turned it around in 2 years. My last school was a very high achieving school, and my biggest problem was keeping us high achieving. Had to approach that very differently than I did my low achieving school. Okay? Does that help? Or did I just completely not answer your question?
No, it did. It did.
Okay.
I also had another question. I think you mentioned it. Did you say you're going to go back into Moodle and kind of reconfigure the final assignment options? You are?
Yeah, because when I looked at them again, they're confusing. So yeah, I'll try to simplify it, and I'll put in big bold letters. Choose one,
Okay.
either paper, video, PowerPoint, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. Any other questions? Okay. Well, then I'm going to